Hi there, so today we're looking at paper 1 question 2 of our AQA English Language GCSE. Now this question here, although it's got quite a low tariff of only having 8 marks, is essentially the building blocks for the rest of your English Language GCSE. Everything they're going to ask you to do here, the approach, the structure, the format of it is replicated throughout all the other questions in your exam. So this is really important that we get a real sound understanding of what to do with this question because it will help us a lot later on. Now, just like my other videos with the English Language GCSE, you can find the source and the exam questions I'm referring to by following this link at the bottom of this screen. So I turn over my page to question 2 and it looks like this. It gives me a small little extract it wants me to focus on from the source that I've already read. And it gives me a question. How does the writer use language here to describe the soldiers in the attack? Now, that's the first thing I'll be circling because I don't want to waste my analysis talking about anything other than the soldiers. I want to make sure it's all specific and targeted to that. Now, I can't do question 2 until I've got my evidence, and this is a very, very important decision that I now need to make because I'm looking for rich quotations. What I mean by a rich quotation is a quotation that's not just got one thing I can say about. It might just have one nice word, but I want a quotation that has got nice techniques, words, and possibly an interesting sentence as well. I want to be able to layer up my interpretations to push me into that higher boundary. So I'm looking for really, really good quotes. So for example, I see one straight away in the second line, a long wavering line of khaki primitive dolls. Now that's a perfect rich quotation because it's got the lead choice of a metaphor in calling them dolls, but I can also analyse wavering, primitive and khaki and also the sentence form as well. So straight away it set me up for a really good answer because there's so much I can say about it. Now, what do I mean by rich quotations? Well, the rich quotations are ones that have got these down the bottom here that the examiner lists for you, and I'm going to talk about those in a short moment. If all else fails and you can't see nice metaphors, nice personification, you go find some imagery. There is always some imagery in this AQA exam, and then you are just dealing them on a word-by-word basis. So what do we mean by these words and phrases, language features, sentence forms the examiner wants? Well, first of all, words and phrases, I'm talking about nouns, verbs, adverbs, adjectives and pronouns, and how we analyse those we're going to go on to in a moment. Language feature techniques, there's millions. It could go on and on and on, but essentially these are the big ones, these are the big guns. Now, the one you're probably not familiar with is anthropomorphism. That's when you give something animal features rather than human features like personification. All the others you should be familiar with. If you're not, you need to make sure you are before you start tackling question 2. And finally, are sentence forms, which people are terrified of and they try and stay away from at all costs. But I'm going to show you in this video they're not as scary as what they might seem. So I've gone through my extract the examiner's given me and I've found all of these different rich quotations. Now all of these I feel there's more than one thing I can say about because they've got techniques and words and interesting sentence choices too. So now I get onto my analysis and I can break it into 4 different sections really. First of all is figurative language. So figurative language talking about similes, metaphors, personification and anthropomorphism. This is any time the examiner is comparing something to something that it is not. So in the example I just gave, it compares the soldiers to dolls. Now I'd be thinking about the image behind that. What do they want me to associate with dolls? What is it they are saying about the soldiers if they're comparing them to dolls? I want to talk about the image that's been created by the choice of the figurative language dolls. Or I'm going to talk about alliteration. Now, alliteration is all about the sound. They don't just throw alliteration together just for the sake of it. Is it a harsh sound? Is it a soft, gentle sound? Is it a long, drawn-out sound? Is it a poppy, quick, sharp sound? What is the sound and how does that reflect the topic? Finally, then look at sentences. Sentences, you get 2 types really, if you want to break it down to its most simple. And you want to think about sentences like shopping bags. So on my left, I've got my big, heavy, difficult sentences. They're the long, clunky ones. They've got probably lots of punctuation in. They're really disjointed. They're really hard for me to say, really hard for me to get through. But then I've got my little quick, snappy ones, my little simple, mild sentences that haven't got lots of punctuation in. I can run with them, I can skip with them, I can go very, very fast. It makes me read it very quickly. Well, the shape of the sentence, the length of it, and how disjointed and broken it is reflects the topic. And then finally, when it comes to words, it's all about the connotations. So the word choice that I picked up a minute ago is primitive. Well, what do I think of when I think of primitive? I think of something that's basic. I think of something that's limited. I think of something that's instinctive. I think of something that's quite vulnerable. Now, bang, if I play my cards right now, I've got 4 layers of interpretations, 4 layers of analysis that I can say about these soldiers just from one word. So connotations are your secret weapon when it comes to this. Now, all of those I've just gone through, I've just put on the screen here for you, and this will be quite a useful, helpful screen, I hope. That for each of these chunks of language choices, I've given you the key question you want to be asking yourself, and also a sentence starter for it. Now, don't look at these sentence starters as patronising or weakness. This is the level of specificity that we're after. When it comes to this language question, the examiner is not reading it as a whole. They are trying to find little sentences, little nuggets of brilliance, little bits that are really specific, really accurate, and really clear. If you follow these short, succinct sentence prompts and target your analysis to the image, to the sound, to the pace, and to the connotations, you can't help but do well in this question. On the right, I've got the best of the rest. The ones that don't really fit into those, but I believe you can get through your exam with just the ones on the left. So now I come to my write-up. The first thing I would do is I need a nice introductory line to introduce the whole of my question to. Now this here captures how I feel language has been used as a whole in this extract. So here's mine. Folks uses language to demonstrate the vulnerability of the soldiers and how powerless they are against the enemy. That's how I feel all of his language choices combined make the soldiers be presented. Notice how I started off with his name, Folks, so I show the examiner straight away I know that this is the writer's work at work here. Now I'm following a P's paragraph structure: point, evidence, explain, and zoom. So in my point, I identify a language feature. Folks uses a metaphor, nice and straightforward. When describing the soldiers, a long wavering line of khaki primitive dolls. I've got my evidence in there. Notice how I've gone in with my richest choice first, because I've got so much I want to say about that metaphor dolls. I've not led in with, I use adjective. I'm going to talk about the metaphor first, thank you very much. Also take note that I haven't listed all the different techniques. I haven't said use a metaphor, use adjective, use a complex sentence. I haven't, because I'm just going to do it one at a time to make my analysis clear and succinct. Now I'm going to explain the metaphor. Dolls are usually associated with receiving love and care, and the juxtaposition of this image with the reality of the battlefield underlines the soldier's vulnerability and inappropriateness for this hostility. Fairly straightforward. Dolls are also associated with childhood and therefore hint at the soldier's naivety and inexperience in battle. Now that's what a high student does. They don't just say one thing about it, they go on and make another. What else does that image suggest? Now I don't stop there. I'm now going to zoom in on the word choices. The adjective wavering connotes something uncoordinated and irregular, reflecting how the might of the enemy has destroyed the rank and order we traditionally associate with an army. I've got that from my connotations. Now again, if I was a fairly good student, I might leave it there and move on, but I'm not. Because I'm a top student, I'm going to go further. Now I've already talked about techniques, I've already talked about words. It would be so easy for me to now talk about khaki or talk about long or something else, another word, but I'm not going to. I'm now going to talk about the sentences, because that's what a top student would do. This is further reflected by this line's long complex sentence that is broken with multiple commas. The disjointed sentence reflects the broken and interrupted advance of the soldiers, and its length reflects how long the ceaseless murder seems to go on for. I've not talked about, because it's a complex sentence, a complex situation. I've talked about how the length and the speed and the difficulty of the sentence reflects the soldier's situation. So now I've got here a perfect model example of what a top student would do, because I've laid out my interpretations, I've offered comment on a range of language choices, and all of my analysis is specific and clear. So if I looked at my mark scheme, I would comfortably be hitting the top band here. This is a perceptive and detailed paragraph, because I've analysed the effect of the writer's choice of language to perceptive levels. I've got if I had another one of these paragraphs, I'd have a range of judicious quotes, and I've got a range of subject terminology which I use appropriately. Now, last thing before I leave you, this is here what the examiner has told myself about how we would break down the mark scheme into a more layman's terms, more understandable language. And look what we're looking at for that top band. A range of words, a range of features, sentences. We're going to make points not everyone else will make, and we can do that if we follow the prompts I've given you in this video, and they will fully explore the connotations with multiple and extended interpretations. Not just one thing, but then what else could it be, what else could it say? So I've basically done that question 2 for you now. So here is another one. If you wanted to go away and practice another question 2, another question for you on the screen, and I've got the sentence starters for you to make it nice and straightforward. Good luck.